Hello and welcome to ET Soonicorns Summit. With over 800 million smartphone and internet users, India is the big destination for investing in a digital future. Digitalization and technology has powered the emergence of 105 unicorns in sectors like fintech, edtech, and SaaS. And there are more Indian startup businesses inching towards the billion-dollar valuation, all shaping the new digital economy. But what are the challenges they face? And what are the opportunities they believe will drive their growth? Now, I have just the people who can give us some insights into some of these questions. Joining me, Suumit Shah, founder and CEO of Dukaan, a no-code platform that enables merchants to launch their e-commerce website in a few minutes and to scale it on the internet. Suumit, good to have you.
Thank you. Thank you so much for having me here.
Next, we have with us Vineet Sukumar, founder and MD of fintech startup Vivriti Capital, which offers debt solutions and asset management for mid-market enterprises in India. Vineet, thank you so very much for your time today.
Thanks for having me.
Next, we have with us Ranjeet Pratap Singh from Pratilipi, which is an online self-publishing platform for Indian language content across various formats. Ranjeet, good to see you here.
Thank you. Same here.
And finally, we have with us Goutam Kurumella, Senior Manager, Startup Solutions, AWS. Good to have you here, Goutam.
Thanks. Pleasure to be here.
All right. So my first question is for all the startups, from 471 startups in 2016 to nearly 73,000 startups till June 2022. India's startup ecosystem, as you all know, has been on fire. We have 105 unicorns, and their combined valuation is over $300 billion, according to estimates. Now, from your individual perspectives and businesses, if you could tell me what are the 2 or 3 growth opportunities and challenges that you see impacting your business in the year or two. So if you want to begin, Suumit Shah, founder and CEO of Dukaan.
Perfect. So I think what sector that we are operating in is a e-commerce enablement. Now, as you know, like a lot of people have started shopping online and so on. There are huge number of opportunities in e-commerce sector itself. Now, challenges that we have seen so far in the markets like India is the first point is like the mobile first markets. Now, while there are like a lot of solutions like Shopify and so on, those are built for the Western worlds where people have generally like iPhone and like 5G connections and so on. But if an Indian seller try to like get online and start selling things online, first of all, like they cannot afford the kind of rates Western softwares have and so on. So there is huge opportunity in terms of building specific solutions to the Indian market, which can operate in the mobile first economies and so on. And again, like this is not just for the India, but also for like 2/3 of the world where all the economies are like working on the mobile. So yeah, I think commerce itself is like pretty huge, right? From enabling someone to start selling online to how you can help them to get more demand, or maybe like optimize their store performance or optimize their design and so on. So huge number of opportunities in the e-commerce sector itself.
And challenges, Suumit?
The people, they won't understand English. So you have to make sure that like all the solutions are built in like specific language and so on. Plus, a lot of people don't have the understanding of, like, for example, in our case, once the store is created, what is the next step? Like, how do I drive more demand? Now you have to get into, explaining like how Google works or how, SEO works or how App Store works and so on. There people are not, that smart enough or like putting more efforts to understand like, how one can drive the demand and so on. So then the whole game becomes about, like how quickly you are able to educate all these people in their regional language, what they understand, so that they can be, successful on the internet. In the age where like predominantly companies like Flipkart and Amazon are, like taking the huge pie of the commerce, while the smaller sellers, they don't get equal opportunities to sell online. Even on the marketplaces, I think like top 1 to 5% people will drive like more than 90% of the GMV, which means like 90% of the people who are listed on Amazon, they don't get even like one order. So what, like help all these people, be back in the business. So that's exactly what we are solving for. And yeah, I think it's a challenge to, get all these people at scale and consistently keep growing, especially in the time when, the whole world is moving back to the normal stage. What we expected that once people start, doing the online transactions and commerce, whether this behavior is going to be like irreversible, no. But yeah, that it's not completely irreversible. People are still preferring, like offline commerce. But at the same time, like a lot of new age brands are coming, especially in the D2C segment. If you have seen brands like Mamaearth and Boats of the world. So I think like fairly huge number of brands are starting with the providing the products. Yeah.
Okay, thank you for that, Suumit. Vineet, you want to take off from where Suumit has left? His challenges are completely different to, are possibly completely different to yours.
Yes, we deal in a very different market, a market where we try to fuel the growth of entrepreneurs. As India today holds the distinction of being the fastest growing economy in the world. And that is simply not possible if more than 20, 30, 40,000 mid-corporates that today employ 3 to 5 million people don't get the adequate fuel to be able to grow their respective businesses, right? And this is cutting across sectors. This could be companies in pharmaceutical, in healthcare, in clean energy, in logistics, in manufacturing, in defense, in shipping, in mining, that need adequate capital to grow, right? Now, it's a fact that in India today, 93% of debt markets, be it loan markets or bond markets, get only service the top 200 to 250 corporates, right? Versus the balance 20, 30,000 odd corporates languishing at very, very, very low levels of capital. And by capital, I mean debt, right? Now, that's the problem that Vivriti was set up to solve. And when we started 5 years back, the goal we set ourselves was that we should make a very, very sizable difference, not just by being the capital providers ourselves, but by co-opting a much larger ecosystem of investors, lenders, including global investors, who should follow our lead into this market and finance this very large problem, right? To give you a scale of the problem scale, today, even at a very inefficient level, right? 20,000 corporates borrow 7 lakh crores, right? Now, if I use a metric that today applies to large corporates, the 7 lakh crores should actually be at 25 lakh crores, right? Which tells you how large the problem is, and therefore why there needs to be many Vivritis to be actually tackling a problem of this scale, right? So the opportunity is absolutely immense. The credit ratio for these companies is abysmally low. The asset quality is very good, and therefore there is a very tangible case for global capital to follow our lead and invest into these businesses, right? But the challenges are many. Firstly, discovering these companies. India is a large country. These companies are spread across, the nook and corner of the country. Discovering is a problem, right? Assessment of these companies is a problem, right? Delivering products at scale, and that too for the complexity and customization that each corporate would require is a problem, right? And over it all, my colleagues on the panel where they're speaking about the advent of technology, consumer tech has made a very significant, has moved a very significant distance in the last decade. Enterprise tech is negligible, right? And therefore, for us, the entire tech stack for acquisition, for product development, for product delivery, for risk management is absolutely being built from scratch. That's our biggest challenge today.
Okay, all right. Ranjeet, let's hear from you. How has it been for Pratilipi?
Sure. In my opinion, I think the biggest advantages or tailwinds have basically been that the market itself has matured in various different ways. So I think When we started building Pratilipi, for example, a bunch of times we would have to chat with people's parents to convince them why they should come and join Pratilipi versus joining a larger company. That doesn't seem to be true anymore. Similarly, if you're hiring mid to senior people from larger corporates, people would often feel like if they worked at Pratilipi for 2-3 years and they wanted to go back to Google or Amazon, how difficult would that be? That's not a problem anymore. Similarly, in terms of fundraising, interacting with other more traditional industries, let's say media or film, has become a lot easier. Just the depth of talent pool as well as capital pool has increased significantly. And it still feels like this is still just a beginning and we are just moving in the right direction where market's maturing at a pretty decent clip. So I think that is probably the biggest advantage that we are seeing in the market. The second big one probably is just the infrastructure improvement that has happened primarily with UPI, but also a few other things. So I think 3-4 years back, people used to say that in India, nobody really pays for anything non-tangible. Now Hotstar has 50 million plus paying subscribers, and not just Hotstar, not just Pratilipi. There are so many other examples where people are paying for digital content in different forms across edtech, health tech, entertainment, so on and so forth. So I think these are two big positives. Negatives, one would probably be in terms of hiring again. India is an open market, which means that, and especially thanks to COVID and remote work, you are not just fighting against companies operating in India. You are not just competing against startups based on India. You are actually essentially competing against everyone everywhere. Even though your customers, especially if you're targeting India as a home market, your customers are going to be paying you in INR. But salaries that you have to now fight for is not just INR. So that becomes difficult, especially for top talent. The second one would probably have to be just uncertainty around regulations, especially like in general true for any new industry, but especially for tech, because not only is it new, but it's also very quickly changing. Like what used to be, what people thought of media has significantly changed. Like, is YouTube a media company? Is YouTube a tech company? Is YouTube an internet company? It's very, very hard to say because it's all of those and a little bit more. So by definition, it's difficult. And especially, I think, in a country like India, it becomes more difficult still. So these would be my top two challenges.
All right. This is all very, very interesting. Goutam, what do you make of, what we've heard from the startup in terms of the opportunity? Everyone's convinced that there is a tremendous opportunity, but everybody's challenges are different. And, we just have these 3 startups, right? So literally just maybe 3 segments. And there are so many of them. So we've got a plethora of challenges and no one has repeated any one of the challenges. What do you make of what they told us?
Yeah, just to add to that, right? I think everyone has covered different sectors or different segments. Probably I will pick another one which was not, talked about in some time. So the one which I want to sort of focus probably is on SaaS startups again. And with the digitization that has increased post-COVID, right? Indian startups, especially the one who are building SaaS solutions, they've seen tremendous amount of growth, right? And so much so that now India has been called as the SaaS factory of the world. And today there are almost like tens of 50 plus million revenue companies who are actually operating in India. And again, the strategies would differ. There are some who opted for India first strategy, and think of companies like Perfios or Razorpay or BillDesk. And then there are companies who have actually pivoted to the global first model, right? Think of companies like Hasura or Observe AI or even Axel Data to begin with. So oftentimes, again, some of these players, they do start with selling in Indian market and trying to go to the nearby regions, but it's pretty much the business model that they are hedging on. But one common theme across all of this, and one common theme which actually comes across, is the things around the culture of efficiency, right? When we look at some of those things, what it means is actually the companies in India can get up and running, with much less capital and than their global counterparts, right? And that's a very interesting thing. And even in best-in-class early-stage SaaS startup companies, we have seen even sales efficiencies, which is like 150%, off the mark. Generally, the global average is anywhere between 70% when we take the global best, right? So we have that unique advantage when it comes to the efficiencies. And we've also seen that there are other things such as taking a multi-product approach, and Indian companies have been pretty smart about building portfolio of solutions rather than just going all in on just one single product, right? I think that has again worked really well for the Indian startups. If you look at the global ones, they will not build a second product unless they see 30 to 40 million ARR coming from the first product. But in India, people would be building second or third product even if the first product has just reached the 5 million ARR mark, right? So and again, the other tailwinds, like Ranjeet mentioned, the tremendous amount of internal things that are happening, right? For example, be it fire standards in the healthcare, ONDC, which is coming up in the e-commerce and retail space, UPI, which has created a revolution in the financial services side. I think these are very strong tailwinds in the industry, so to speak. Yeah, so that's my view.
Okay. Gautam, can you take us through some of the challenges, that you see startups facing, in your line of work? And, how can you and your specialist team of solutions provider help these businesses scale, especially in these times, where it is important to be cost effective?
Yeah, so startups always work in severe constraint, right? Either there is a resource crunch, or there is a capital crunch, or there are some business pressures, right? So there's always things which are happening under severe constraint, and especially in times like this when people are talking about slowdown in the investments, or especially the funding winter, as we keep hearing, right? There is a significant focus that actually goes into how we can get the most for the minimum, right? So one of the things that we have actually done is in terms of helping startups optimize on the costs, and we do that in a much more structured way. We do something called as well-architected reviews. And in well-architected reviews, we cover different aspects. There is operational excellence, there is things around security, reliability, performance, efficiencies, cost optimization, and sustainability. But what we are actually seeing more and more is the focus on the cost optimization itself, right? So, and we are helping the startups in a much more phased approach to sort of take control of their costs and how they can actually continue to optimize on their spend at the same time, not compromise on any innovations, right? So there are different programs that we have also come up with to sort of help them run those innovation projects, but at the same time take measures to actively keep the costs at the minimum. So we do that with multiple approaches, and there's something that is working for us.
Thanks for that, Gautam. There are offerings that AWS has, and many startups have benefited from it. My next question again is to all startups, right? It's estimated that by 2025, India's internet user base will touch about 900. Obviously, this is a huge opportunity and a market for digital products and services like those offered by your businesses. Can you give us a sense of your product and tech strategy and the roadmap for solving challenges, which may be unique to the Indian geography? Suumit, if you want to begin.
Yeah, so what we have done, especially for understanding what is the next feature that we want to build, is we have made our roadmap public, and there's a community of some 40,000 plus sellers on Facebook called Dukaan VIP. There people will start expressing this is the problem that I'm facing, or maybe this is the solution that you can think of building, and so on. And more number of people ask for the same thing. We just go and build that. And I think that should be the approach, especially when you are building the platforms. Now what happens in case of platforms is one user can have completely different requirement. For instance, we recently onboarded one of the VC funded enterprise on the platform. At the same time, there is a guy who is from second tier, third tier of the city, who has completely different expectation of features. Now how do you solve for the both? It's like building operating system, and everybody is going to face different problems and so on. But what I found is this community and staying super connected with the users or sellers is what which helps us understand what is the next feature that you have to build and so on. Now, be it a feature which can help them to link their Razorpay account with Dukaan, or be it a feature which can show the countdown timer on products. It all comes from the users. So ultimately, I think if you are like well connected with the users, then each of these companies could have like their own ways of what feature they want to build and how the roadmap is going to look like. Plus, I think like for the SaaS companies especially, like not about like the hardware companies and so on, it is super easy and like super in real time to collect the feedback and iterate all the things and all that. So yeah. Plus India is like weird market. Like few years back, say like India is like US market. Then somebody said like no, India is like China. No, India is like India, and it's not a country, it's a continent. Like based upon like which geography you go in, they will have like completely different taste, completely different expectations and so on. So I think each company can have like their own context, their own journey, and they can figure out like what is the best for them.
Do you see echoes of the strategy when it comes to Pratilipi?
So in terms of context, I absolutely agree. India is a very large country and there's a lot of diversity of almost everything, from culture to language to everything else that you can think of. Even though we are essentially a B2C company, so we can't really customize for each customer. Literature alone would have 25 million monthly active users. It's impossible for us to even talk to 25 million people. So our approach has been to do hyper personalization and try and productize almost everything. So essentially, instead of saying that this is a group of users, let's call it segment A and a different segment B. So instead of saying that, okay, segment A sees this and segment B sees this, we are essentially saying, okay, this is a person A and the person A sees this and person B sees this. So what you see would be very, very different, or your experience with the product would be fairly different from my experience with the product. And that's just a function of like what kind of company you're running. So in our case, it's not possible to customize on a segment by segment basis.
Can you give us a sense of, the product and tech strategy that you have that you've set up for Pratilipi, and what are the unique challenges that you want to solve with it?
So Pratilipi is essentially a storytelling platform. So we have multiple different business units within Pratilipi, including online literature, comics, audiobooks, podcasts. We recently took over Westland Books team. And we also license our stories to other people. So different products may have different product roadmaps. But I think the most important bit on the product and technology front outside of personalization is essentially how do you work with Indian languages where there hasn't been enough training data till now. The good thing is that now that we have training data, we have built a bunch of different models to do different kind of things with data, including, for example, just search for Indian languages or transliteration or translation. Or can you automatically convert a story from text to audio or video or comics? Or can you can you help find any grammatical errors or spelling errors into whatever has been written? Can you figure out a way to automatically find if there's pornographic content that somebody has published, or somebody has published a hate speech, or somebody has made a copyright violation? So essentially done a lot of work around finding these. Some of these actually we have open sourced already. Others we intend to open source over a period of time. But I think the unique parts that we do are two just around personalization. And the second would basically be around these tools which know how to work with Indian languages. Just to be clear, it's not that we are always going to be focused only on India. We launched US about a week back. We will launch other countries over a period of time. But it's like essentially build from India, start for India, and then take them global wherever that's relevant.
All right, Ranjeet, and we were still great success with it. Vineet, if you want to, take up this question, if you can give us a sense of product tech strategy that you have and the roadmap for solving challenges which are unique to Bharat.
Sure. In our world, I think what has plagued enterprise finance for a long time is the fact that enterprise data is rarely ever public. So while consumer data has moved in a very, very different direction from being private to being public to being accessible, enterprise data has remained annoyingly opaque for a very, very long time. And what that does is that delays decision making, that delays the time that it takes for capital to reach such companies. It delays the ability for companies to even access capital on account of this opacity. Now, a lot of the work that we're doing on tech is to solve for this and to bring data into easily readable formats, into being able to build multiple sources and pipes into an organization, into being able to access information on let us say, for example, statutory payments to salaries, to their financial records, to news information and highlights on a company, to various other alerts that are dealing with their day-to-day commerce, which we can pull into a data lake that can give us a much better and more accurate picture of an organization. And what that does is that you can have a remarkable impact on the company's ability to access finance, on our ability to be quick, and more importantly, on our ability to monitor a very large portfolio of companies, right? Let me put this in the context of numbers for you. If I had to build a reasonably large business in the space that we are in, it would mean that we would have to monitor anywhere between 2,000 to 5,000 companies at scale, right? Now, this is easily 10x of anything anybody has attempted. And it would require a very significantly advanced early warning signal tracker that gives us literally real-time information on the quality of the book that we are running. Similarly, if we had to build the scale in the next 5 years, it would mean that we are actually adding a company a day, right? Versus today, the prevalent traditional time period is 6 months, 3 months to 6 months, right?
Per company.
Per company. And therefore, the acceleration required in processing capacity, in data management, in underwriting, right, is very, very significant. Now, these are the challenges for me for the next 2 years, 3 years, 5 years, as India gets more and more connected and more data pipes open up. The opportunity for me is to be able to move mid-corporate financing from a highly opaque space right now to much more data-centric, much more connected, and much faster.
Can you give us a sense of the kind of impact that you've seen with those, where you manage to bridge the gap for, some of the mid-sized enterprises?
Sure. An easy way to understand this is a single metric that says that for an entrepreneur who has, let us say, put in $100 of capital into his company, right? How much of external debt support does he or she get, right? That number, as it turns out, as an average for 20,000 companies in India today, is $40. So $40 for every $100 of capital, right? The same number for a large corporate, which is very, very well known, right? Think Tata, Birla, Ambani, and so on, right? Is $300, right? And that shows you the difference that the debt capital can make to a company's growth, scale, ambition, ability to kind of realize their dreams, right? Now today, Vivriti covers north of 500 such companies, and I can certainly say that we have been able to give them financing that the market has not been able to give them, longer tenor money that kind of stays with the company for a much long period of time, allowing them to invest and deploy it well, and also allowing them to build a much larger enterprise than what they would have otherwise been able to build with their net worth alone, right? Our ambition is not just to be able to provide money, as I mentioned, but to align both domestic and international pools of capital to add to our work, right? Because by no means can a single Vivriti make a difference by just lending, right? So our objective is to use data, use technology, use integrations, use product development, to take these credits to a pool of investors who can come in through the asset management solutions we provide and bring that money as a pipe, right? And when we do that, then genuinely we will see the capital ratios of these companies significantly improve from where they are today.
All of these companies are really changing the shape and what Bharat and what India will be in a few years, and contributing to the growth of this country. Companies must have a very clear road to profitability, and there is really no substitute for sound corporate governance. This, of course, is being acknowledged and recognized across the startup system. What are the key shifts or the changes that you think are needed or that you see are being adopted to ensure this solid and sustained growth?
Yeah, I'll take the liberty to go first. So I'll again take the feather from the SaaS startups again. And I earlier talked about sales efficiencies, right? And some of the SaaS startups have hit the 150% sales efficiency rates, which means that for every 100 million that you want to get as an ARR, you're spending much lesser when compared to the global peers. But what is actually also important is the net dollar retention, right? So what it means is how you can actually retain the customers for a longer period of time, how you can drive better engagement, how you can actually create more value to the customers that you already have onboarded, right? So these are some of the things that are becoming extremely important. And when the startups are actually looking at profitability or road to profitability, as we call, or path to profitability, they're creating different functions like customer success function. Again, the name differs from company to company, but essentially teams who are focusing on helping their end customers succeed and retain them for a longer period of time. And what we have actually seen as an outcome for some of the best-in-class startups is, again, the NDR percentage is at 140 plus percentage. And what we are also seeing is in terms of the customer acquisition payback period, which is the CAC payback period, which is also sort of coming down to less than 12 months for the well-managed startups. So these are some of the shifts that we are starting to see, which is early sign. It's not just about becoming big, but it's also about having a sustained roadmap for growth and innovate in this marketplace.
Suumit, if you want to go next, can you tell us a bit about what you think about having a road to profitability and ensuring corporate governance, as you build and scale?
I think that is super important. But up until like 6 months back, seems like most of the startups were not caring too much about the profitability or the corporate governance, so on, until like few cases came in. But what I believe in is like, if you want to be in the long term, then it is like super important to figure out the whole business model and have the proper corporate governance structure in the company early on. While most of the companies will still keep focusing on the top funnels, like how many million downloads like somebody has got or so on, and then delay the plan of monetization, so on. So I think clearly what is happening right now is like almost all the people have, or all the founders have started seriously thinking about the ways how they can monetize their audience and how they can build a sustainable business plan and so on. And it is happening right now, which is a good sign. Otherwise, like, people are just busy spending money on like Facebook and Google AdWords, I guess. So yeah, I think that's going to be like best in the long term for all the startups which are operating, especially in India, because this is like super difficult market, right? Like people don't even pay for the operating system where you are trying to sell your small software, right? So yeah, I think the best scenario for the SaaS companies, at least, I think, would be build in India, sell to the world. And I think that's what most of the successful SaaS companies from India like have the characteristics of.
Ranjeet, what's your view on this?
I think corporate governance one is easier to answer. I think as soon as you have more than one person, even if there are two founders and nobody else in the company, I think there still has to be checks and balances to make sure that you are operating in the right manner. Now, of course, the standards and what processes to set, that will differ based on the stage and like number of people that you are operating with. But I think there the answer is more black and white, that like, we need to kind of just do a better job and operate with a higher degree of integrity. That has always been true. I think once cases come up, people kind of start thinking about more deeply, but I think we, as a just ecosystem, we can do much better there. On the profitability part, though, I think VC industry or startup industry just goes through ups and downs, and both the sides, they are one side on like either extreme caution or extreme greed. I think decisions taken under either fear or greed are never good. You have to kind of find the balance, which means that different companies should operate differently. There are companies where optimizing for short-term profit is good. There are companies where optimizing for short-term revenue is good. There are companies that are actually sacrificing for both is better for the long term. So I think what founders should think about is what is your unit cost and what is your long-term defensibility. If your unit cost is zero, then non-monetizing it, it's not just okay, it's probably actually even a good idea. Like if WhatsApp started monetizing when they launched, WhatsApp would have been worth basically a grand total of zero. Versus on the other hand, if you are if you're losing money on a unit economics basis, and if you don't have any structural defensibility, then basically you're just burning money on fire, and you should get your houses in better order. It's hard to give a one size fits all answer whether you should chase profitability or not, in my opinion. It depends.
Okay, Ranjeet, thank you for that. What about you, Vineet? What are the key changes and shifts that you think that are needed, especially when it comes to, say, corporate governance, which may be being adopted or you feel need to be adopted to ensure sustained growth?
Yeah, I think, Milani, this is critical for the next years to come. It was important for us to invest in corporate governance very, very, very early in our cycle. Today, for the last 5 years, since the beginning of the company, we've had both process audit, internal audit, and financial audit being handled by Big Four. And within a year of starting off, we had onboarded 3 stalwart independents on the board coming in from very, very strong 30-year plus private sector experience as active members on our board. Now, I think these problems have come to roost because high growth private equity funded startups have found themselves in situations where there had to be calls taken to show the right numbers, irrespective of the business fundamentals, and that pressure has caused a few of them to crack. Right? The other reason why we've seen challenges is for want of a better word, greed, which has resulted in not just unsavory practices on the business, but unfortunately also incidents where we saw profiting on the side. I think the answer to all of this are extremely strong controls and a culture of governance. And I can't overemphasize the fact that we need a culture of governance that permeates through the entire organization. It also requires the founder to set up a very strong CXO team that decentralizes control and therefore does not really make all decisions come to a single person who could interpret things differently. And I think these are very important fundamentals to set in place fairly early. Now, the good part is, at least in my world, we are seeing this happen more often than not. And we are seeing this happen much earlier in the life cycle of a startup today than we used to see 5 years, 10 years back. And therefore, we are significantly encouraged. We are a lender to a very large share of the startup community. And these are important considerations for us, not just for ourselves, but for the companies that we lend to, where governance checks form a very crucial part of our evaluation.
Right. And I think this is the right and a sober note to actually end on, because this is actually very, very important. And all of you have emphasized, you are the league of future unicorns of India, shaping the new digital economy. Your companies will shape the next decade of India. Thank you very much for joining me today. Suumit Shah of Dukaan, Vineet Sukumar of Vivriti Capital, Ranjeet Pratap Singh of Pratilipi, and Goutam Kurumella of AWS. Thank you so very much for your time and for your thoughts today.